Morning, everyone. My name is Henry Santana, our at-large city councilor, and I am the chair of the Boston City Council Committee of Public Safety and Criminal Justice. Today is February 21st, 2024. In accordance with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement that public bodies conduct its meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public, the City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually via Zoom. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Flowers Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.ps@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of the hearing. Individuals will be called on in order in which they signed up and will have 2 minutes to testify. If you wish to sign up for public testimony and have not done so, please email our Central Staff Liaison, Megan Kavanaugh, at megan.kavanaugh@boston.gov for the Zoom link, and your name will be added to the list. Today's hearing is on 3 grants to the City of Boston to fund public safety initiative administered by the Office of Emergency Management and the Boston Police Department. Each of these 3 grants has a separate docket, which I will read into the record, along with a brief overview of each grant before our administration panelists speak in detail on these grants and address council questions. First, docket number 0282, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expand the amount of $92,735.50 in the form of a grant for the federal FY23 Emergency Management Performance Grant awarded by Federal Emergency Management Agency, passed through the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency to be administered by the Office of Emergency Management. The grant will fund the enhancement of operational capacity at the Boston Emergency Operations Center and promote the professional development of OEM staff. To add a little bit more context to this grant, the Emergency Management Performance Grant, EMPG, is an annual grant that provides funds to assist the City of Boston in preparing for all hazards. And in recent years, this grant has been used to address various needs, including technological and facility upgrades at the Boston Emergency Operations Center, distribution of COVID-19 resources, and professional development for emergency management staff. We'll hear more details on this grant from representatives of the Office of Emergency Management during today's hearing. Second, docket number 0283, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expand the amount of $65,000 in the form of a grant for the FY23 Community Mitigation awarded by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund investigations that are coordinated between the Boston Police Department, Human Trafficking Unit, and other law enforcement entities. As a brief overview, this grant will provide $50,000 in funding for traffic safety patrols during periods of high casino violation, as well as investigations of car break-ins and other crime-related casino operations. The grant would also fund $15,000 of overtime for the Human Trafficking Unit to work with other law enforcement agencies on sex trafficking cases. We'll hear more details from representatives of the Boston Police Department Area A and Human Trafficking Unit during today's hearing. And lastly, docket number 0344, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expand the amount of $23,400 in the form of a grant for the FY24 Municipal Road Safety awarded by the United States Department of Transportation, passed through the MA Executive Office of Public and Safety and Security to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund high visibility enforcement of motor vehicle laws, included but not limited to speeding and aggressive driving, distracted driving, impaired driving, and occupant protection. The grant will provide funds for overtime for traffic, pedestrian, and bike safety mobilizations in the partnership with other law enforcement entities statewide, and the purchase of speed measuring devices for traffic safety. Representatives from the Boston Police Department will speak in more in detail about these grant budget items during today's hearing. These matters were sponsored by Mayor Michelle Wu. Dockets number 02820283 were referred to the committee on February 7, 2024, and docket number 0344 was referred to the committee on February 24, 2024. Today, I am joined by my colleagues in order of arrival. I will name them off: Councilor Aaron Murphy, Councilor Ed Flynn, Council President Ruthie Lujan, Councilor Ben Weber, Councilor Gabriela Coletta, Councilor John Fitzgerald. I will now allow opening remarks for the councilors.
Thank you.
I'll now give Councilor Aaron Murphy. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Thank you. And I'm happy to be here on your first hearing. Congratulations, Councilor Santana. And thank you for convening, and each of these grants are important. So I'm looking forward to hearing from each different department on more information on each one. So don't want to take up any time in opening remarks, but we'll have some questions after I hear from the different departments. So thank you for being here, everyone. Thank you, Councilor Santana.
Councilor Ed Flynn. Councilor Ed Flynn,
you're on mute. Yeah.
Councilor Flynn, you're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for chairing this hearing, and for the administration staff that is also present. These three grants are critical. They'll ensure that city services continue in an effective manner, and that they're also an opportunity for us, especially the human trafficking and the traffic enforcement. They're able to help us as we prepare for our questioning during the upcoming budget process. You know, the $23,000 for traffic enforcement from the Boston Police Department is something I would like to see expanded across the city, along with human trafficking that is taking place in our city, in many hotels in my district, and Councilor Durkin and Councilor Coletta's district as well. But human trafficking is a critical issue that we have to continue to work on. And just want to say thank you to the Boston Police Office of Emergency Management as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Council President Ruthie Lujan, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to give you a sincere congratulations on chairing your first hearing. It's really exciting, and we're just so lucky to have you in this leadership position. Thank you for holding the hearing on these grants, on human trafficking, on high visibility traffic enforcement, operational capacity at the Boston Emergency Operations Center, grants that I've been happy to support in the past. Also last week, on the council, I offered and introduced, and it passed unanimously, a hearing on a resolution for us to continue combating human trafficking, and really happy that all my councilors displayed their commitment to combating human trafficking across the city. So these grants are so important, whether it's the Office of Emergency Management or resolving issues of trafficking. So I want to thank, I know Andrew was present at the last meeting. Thank you, Andrew, for your work. I want to thank Detective Gaines, and of course, Chief Benford, for all of your work here, and I'm happy to support these grants. And again, want to thank the administration for being here, and Councilor Santana, I want to thank you for your leadership. We've passed these grants in the past, and I look forward to us having the opportunity to vote on them. So thank you. I look forward to hearing from my colleagues as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor President. Councilor Ben Weber, do you now have the floor?
Thank you, Chair, and Councilor Santana. Like you, I'm a newbie here, and I look forward to learning alongside you as we go forward here. And I'm happy to take part in this hearing and learn about how these grants are going to, enhance safety in the community. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Gabriela Coletta, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Santana. It's great to say that, and congratulations on your first hearing. No opening remarks. I'm just grateful for everyone's time here from the administration. Look forward to learning about these grants, and if I have any questions, I will be sure to let folks know. But just thank you all for being here and for the work you do every day.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor John Fitzgerald, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations as well, Henry. Way to go, Councilor. Nope, look forward to looking through these, and thank the folks that are here that are working for the city that will be working on behalf of these grants, and look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. I also now want to recognize my Vice Chair, Councilor Brian Worrell. Now you have the floor.
Congratulations, Chair, on your first hearing. It's an honor to be able to serve alongside you in this committee in public safety. I look forward to your leadership and doing great work to making Boston a healthier, safer, more active city. Just also want to thank all the administration that's here. Love to see the coordinated effort to combat human trafficking, and I'm looking forward to the conversation and the presentation, and also the passing of these grants. And congratulations once again.
Thank you, Councilor. I would like now to introduce today's panelists testifying on behalf of the administration, starting with Tremaine Benford, Chief of Emergency Management, Office of Emergency Management, Andrew Blornais, Assistant Deputy Chief of Administration, Office of Emergency Management, Maria Cheevers, Director of Research and Development, Boston Police Department, Stephanie Gaines, Detective Human Traffic Unit, Boston Police Department, Sean Martin, Captain A1 and A15, Boston Police Department. I would now like to ask a representative from the Office of Emergency Management to provide a brief overview for docket number 0282, the federal FY23 Emergency Management Performance Grant.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate you holding this hearing, and congratulations to not only you, but all the new councilors that are joining and the committee as well. So I'd like to thank you, as well as my staff, Andrew, that's on, who does a great job every day in supporting me in my role in the work that we do. Happy to report out this morning with regards to the EMPG grant for FY23. It's always a tremendous opportunity to present and share information on it through a transparency and an open lens to engage the conversation so that we're all in the most appropriate space and support of our constituents. The Emergency Management Performance Grant is an annual non-competitive grant awarded to all municipalities within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to provide financial support for emergency management activities. As the largest municipality in the Commonwealth, Boston receives the largest share, or one of the largest shares, of this funding each year. The grant is administered by the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, and is awarded to and managed by the Office of Emergency Management for the City of Boston. The city has consistently received this grant and requires a dollar-for-dollar cost share using our operating funds to support acceptance of the grant. This funding is critical for expanding service delivery and building additional capacity. It enables OEM to offer programming while freeing up vital operating funds to support other key city initiatives. Boston OEM has used this funding to procure the following goods and services in recent years. They include technological upgrades to the city's Emergency Operations Center, professional development opportunities for OEM staff, facility upgrades at the EOC to ensure security enhancements for response assets. We've had instances where our vehicles have been vandalized, so we've been able to enhance our security posture over there to protect our assets. We've also been able to use these funds to acquire critical box trucks and other resources to help us most notably during the pandemic in delivering vital PPE test kits on behalf of other city departments that lacked operational capacity, like community centers, schools, BPHC, and other city departments. We also use these resources to support staff uniforms, as well as efforts to promote equitable and inclusive community engagement. I want to just mention just a little bit at a high level, Mr. Chair, about the program from the federal perspective. It is one of the grant programs that constitutes DHS's and FEMA's focus on all hazards emergency preparedness. That is really a contemporary approach to how we address emergency management. Is we focus and look through an all hazards lens and try and be as best prepared as we possibly can to respond to evolving threats and or planned and unplanned emergencies. It also includes preparing and being prepared for the ongoing conversations around climate readiness and climate change. These funds are authorized by Congress, and the EMPG grant supports the goal of strengthening preparedness and resilience. The 2022 to 26 FEMA Strategic Plan outlines a bold vision and 3 ambitious goals to address challenges the agency may face during a pivotal moment in the field of emergency management. Those 3 goals include instill equity as a foundation of emergency management. And I want to just pause and highlight the proud equity goals that we adopted in OEM several years ago, particularly after the untimely death of George Floyd, to ensure that we were, excuse me, not only meeting the moment, but really preparing our posture for the future on how best to engage our diverse communities. Goal 2, lead a whole of community approach in climate resilience. And goal 3, promote and sustain a ready FEMA and prepared nation. When we talk about a prepared nation, that really speaks to the partnership between emergency management at the local level, state level, and federal level. We've learned some valuable lessons over the years in recognizing that we have to do a better job with collaboration and coordination. So when we talk about leading the nation, while it's not our primary responsibility at the local level, we are really constituent driven. It really does highlight the partnership and the coordination that has to happen during major response and the reliance on services and resources from all levels of government. The primary objective of the fiscal 23 EMPG program is to provide these funds to assist state, local, tribal, and territorial emergency management agencies. The goal is to ensure a secure and resilient nation, as I mentioned. And we want to ensure that our partnership is strong and we are well prepared to meet the moment when the time comes, and hopefully it doesn't. However, we want to make sure that we have a positive and a prepared posture. The last piece of this talks about being collaborative and working in partnership. And we maintain a strong operational, functional, and working relationship with MEMA, which is our state partner. That's a critical piece of this entire puzzle, because how this process works as it relates to procuring resources and support during times of crisis is it really is a hierarchical model, meaning at the local level, you're expected to expend all local resources in response to the crisis. Then you request the response and support of the state, and then from there up to the federal government. So it's extremely important for us to recognize those partnerships with our state and federal partners, 1, and 2, ensure that we have these resources and these capabilities to meet the moment at the local level, knowing that there is a process for getting additional resources and it takes time. I want to just close by just mentioning a couple of things with regards to this year's grant and how it does support us. Emergency management lacks the robust funding that many of our other public safety disciplines have to rely on to be able to supplement and procure services to meet service delivery at the local level. Our operational budget relies on these resources to help us ensure readiness, being prepared to engage our community, and maintaining a functional EOC. These resources were extremely helpful when we co-located our department from City Hall over to the EOC at 85 Bragdon Street. We were able to use these resources to help with technological upgrades at the EOC. They were extremely helpful in helping us build out the space so that it could welcome and support our staff and the work that we would do. Upgrades and readiness include our emergency response teams. It includes maintaining cots and blankets and pillows, things that are extremely critical in supporting our communities in times of crisis. They also include technological upgrades like Web EOC, which is our primary web-based or virtual platform for standing up an incident to be able to enhance coordination across departments as well as with our private sector and state partners. I want to just mention a couple of major incidences that we have responded to, and we use these resources to maintain our readiness. And I just want to mention that when we talk about readiness, we must recognize that requires us to be ready for when it does happen, and it also requires us to work from a proactive posture to prevent it. So we have to have resources to invest in human capital, in training, in equipment, and as well as resources and facilities so that we're ready to meet the moment when it does occur. And I just want to highlight some major events that have happened across the city over the course of the last couple of years where these resources are extremely helpful. They include a major fire over in Brighton on Commonwealth Ave where a large building was impacted. Over in East Boston, major fires on Saratoga Street in the Casket Fire in Orient Heights. We had major water leaks on Beacon Street in the Back Bay, as well as in Alston on Cambridge Street. We use these assets to support all of the open civic events that happen throughout the year, particularly during the warm months, to support civic engagements on behalf of our communities. We most recently had a big fire on Ellington Street in Dorchester. Unfortunately, several years ago, we had a major fire during one of the holidays on Warren Street where we lost a body, where Councilor Flynn, as well as Councilor Fernandez Anderson, responded to support the community through that difficult challenge. We had the Edison plant collapse last year, where Councilor Flanagan came over and supported the response over there, as well as a major fire in Lower Mills several years ago where 8 homes were impacted. The community came together, emergency management came together to support the fire departments as well as other city departments in their response. And I also want to just point out a couple of other ones that don't necessarily get the attention but are worthy of mentioning, because when we talk about constituent services, we know that when families are impacted, when people are on our streets, whether it's a state responsibility or otherwise, it becomes our reality because they're in our neighborhoods and they impact our neighborhoods. And I want to just mention when the state stood up the transportation building in support of the migrants about a little over a month ago, it was OEM that supported and provided initial blankets as well as pillows to support those families in a dignified way. Most recently, a couple of weeks ago, you would have saw or heard on the news, maybe from your constituents as well, we had a dorm room over at the Mass College of Art on Huntington Ave that went down because of some maintenance work. The reality was OEM Boston was the first to respond and initiate that support before the state was called in and came in to support, although it's a state school. I also, want to mention down in Chinatown, we had a major hotel that had a carbon monoxide leak a little over a year ago, for which we went down to support guests that were visiting our cities. And then lastly, in Roslindale, there was a motor vehicle accident last year where a vehicle went into a business, and we started the initial conversation with our state partners and federal partners about SBA options to be able to support those businesses. In closing, I want to mention that for this year, this grant will help us support tech refresh, field response uniforms for our staff, training and professional development, incident response, as well as community preparedness for our residents. It is critical for maintaining and developing capacity and limiting further strain on our limited operational funds. And again, it allows the city, the council, the mayor to be able to focus resources on other critical priorities in using these resources. In closing, I humbly implore the acceptance of these funds to ensure we have full capacity to service our neighborhoods, and welcome the opportunity to engage or answer any questions anyone may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chief Benford, for those remarks and for that overview. I would like now to ask a representative from the Boston Police Department to provide a brief overview for docket number 0283, the FY23 Community Mitigation Grant.
Good morning. Am I on?
Yep. Thank you, Lieutenant.
Lieutenant Sean McCarthy, assigned to Area A1. I'm the admin lieutenant here, filling in for Captain Sean Martin this morning in regards to this grant. Could just give you some information. Area A1, Area A15. Area A1 covers the downtown Boston area. A15 covers Charlestown. We've seen since the casino, the Charlestown area in particular has been negatively impacted by increased traffic flow in and around the roadways connected to the Encore Casino, including motor vehicle, pedestrian, and bicycle accidents. In addition, there has been an increase in car thefts and motor vehicle larcenies as well. To combat the continuance of these incidents, we here at Area A1, A15 need high visibility patrols in these areas, especially on the weekends, the high impact times between 4 p.m. and 4 a.m., Fridays and Saturdays, weekends and holidays. In addition, our detectives needed additional time to implement strategies to combat the increase in car thefts and larcenies. These strategies include surveillance, community meetings, to educate our constituents in Charlestown about targeting tactics to protect their cars from theft and larceny, additional hours to investigate car thefts and larcenies, and the overtime funds are needed for all these activities. In particular, we had a fatal accident last year on the Alford Street Bridge, which took up a considerable time investigatively, and also in terms of traffic enforcement with our manpower being the way it is now, actually having specific officers assigned to combat the traffic congestion, issue motor vehicle citations, et cetera. We really don't even have the manpower for that on a regular shift. So having these funds is critical. We can hire officers on an overtime basis to get them out there on these high visibility traffic enforcements, because obviously with the increased amount of traffic coming in from Everett to and from the casino, the possibility for accidents, speeding, and all these different issues come up. And the Charlestown residents, when the casino first opened up, were very vocal about, what we'd be doing in the Boston police angle. And this grant helps us with that by allowing us to hire officers with these funds to get out there and do traffic enforcement. And the more traffic enforcement we have, hopefully the more voluntary compliance we have, to be a reduction in auto accidents, bicycle accidents, pedestrian accidents, et cetera. And that's basically it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Lieutenant McCarthy. I would like now to ask a representative from the Boston Police Department to provide a brief overview for docket number 0344, the FY24 Municipal Road Safety.
Before we move on to that, I'd like to introduce Detective Stephanie Gaines, who can speak to the human trafficking side of the Mass Gaming Commission grant, because there's two pieces within that. So if that's okay, I'd like to hand this over to Detective Gaines.
Detective Gaines, you now have the floor.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Detective Gaines with the Boston Police Human Trafficking Unit. The Human Trafficking Unit is charged with 3 separate and distinct activities. The first one is to investigate in criminal enterprises that profit from the sexual exploitation of vulnerable persons. The second one is identifying and arresting buyers who drive the sex trade by increasing demand for the purchase of these vulnerable persons. And the third one is following up on referrals that come into the Human Trafficking Unit by family members and service providers of young persons that are missing and assumed to be coerced, exploited, and forced into the Boston sex trade. The Human Trafficking Unit will utilize this overtime to perform joint surveillance activities with other law enforcement agencies that help to protect casino staff and patrons, as well as buyer demand deterrence. Enforcement and investigative duties. A lot of investigative hours go into a lot of these cases, so this overtime will help with that. Not sure if anybody has any questions, but that's the gist of from human trafficking.
Thank you, Detective Gaines. I would now like to ask a representative from the Boston Police Department to provide a brief overview for docket number 0344, the FY24 Municipal Road Safety.
Hi, my name is Maria Cheevers. I'm the Director of Research and Development for the Boston Police Department. The Bureau of Field Services operates this initiative annually. I'm trying to get Officer Vladimir Xavier onto the call, but I'm not sure that he's been able to get in. I've sent him the link. So in lieu of that, unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to represent him at this hearing today. So this is an annual grant from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, and it's called the Municipal Road Safety Grant. We are receiving $23,400. There is no match requirement. And this money will be broken into 3 different areas. There'll be $9,360,000 set aside for overtime for traffic mobilizations in partnership with other law enforcement entities statewide. When I say that the state conducts a number of mobilizations annually, and as they operate them, they ask jurisdictions from all over the state to participate. So Boston is one of the jurisdictions that participates in these mobilizations over a year's time period. Some of those mobilizations focus on drunk driving, other ones focus on distracted driving, other ones are seatbelt. So they have different categories for each mobilization. Another segment of the funding, another $9,360, focuses very specifically in Boston around bicycle and pedestrian safety and those types of mobilizations. And then the third amount of money that they give us within that $23,400 will allow us to buy 2 LiDAR speed devices, which are basically devices that enable police officers to tell what the speed is of persons going by certain roads that are often the types of roads that encourage speeding. I don't want to say encourage, but I think you know what I'm talking about. This grant is began on October 31st, 2023, and will end this September 2024. Oftentimes it takes the state a little while to get us the award letter, and that's why you're seeing this grant before you now. But once it's passed, we'll be able to join those mobilizations and begin the project. And one more thing around just general our objectives for this grant. The BPD is committed to enhancing the safety of motor vehicle operators, pedestrians, and cyclists as a key component within our overall community policing mission. For mobilization activities, our desired impact would be to reduce collision and violation incidents in all 3 categories of motor vehicle, traffic safety enforcement, ped and bike enforcement. We will do this through overtime funds for officers to utilize to participate in these planned mobilizations and through the purchase of the LiDAR devices for districts that currently do not have those devices. The 3 objectives are to deploy Boston police officers to participate in all traffic enforcement mobilizations convened by the Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security in order to reduce motor vehicle collisions and violations by 5%. Same thing with the ped and bike violations, a reduction by 5%, and obviously the purchase of these LiDAR devices. And so that is the FY24 Municipal Road Safety Grant. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Detective Gaines, and thank you, Director Cheevers, for providing details on that grant. I would actually just like to thank all our panelists for being here today and providing that overview. I would now like to pass it over to my colleagues in order of arrival, just for first round of questions. So, Councilor at Large, Erin Murphy, you have now have the floor.
Thank you. And as always, thank you to everyone who explained these grants in such a in-depth way. I think it really speaks to the importance of us holding these hearings to really understand what the money is going to, because I do know myself, but also from residents when they call, I'm happy to hear about the grants that will be supporting traffic. Obviously, the human trafficking, Detective Gaines is crucially important, but then we're also talking about the street traffic and cars. And I often hear that the offices assigned to the different districts who deal with the car safety and traffic are overburdened, don't always get to respond to hit and runs or break-ins, something that I know residents often go to this, walk into the department if their car's been stolen or just other things. So, and obviously street safety is an importance to us on the council too. I know Councilor Flynn, since he's been elected, has been really advocating for slower streets and safer streets. And in my neighborhood, we're starting to get speed humps. It's unfortunate that we need speed humps to make sure that people drive a safe speed, but it's just the reality right now. And there's more cars, there's more people, and just making sure that the offices and all of the different departments have what they need to provide these important services. So happy to support this when it comes forward next week at the council meeting, and just thank you for the overview of each one. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Adlin, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for conducting this meeting in such a professional manner. It's an informative meeting, and it's exactly why we should be listening to these dedicated city professionals. So as city councilors, we learn as much as we can about the city departments and the impact they have on residents. All people that testified here were excellent, providing great information. I guess one question I have, and Chief Bedford, I had the opportunity to visit you at your location several times at your headquarters at Office of Emergency Management. Professional development, Chief, tell me the importance of working closely with cities and towns, maybe in Massachusetts, maybe across the country, but learning from each other, understanding what's happening in Chicago and New York might have an impact on Boston. But how important is it for cities and towns such as Boston to work with other cities and towns across the country?
Councilor, thank you very much for the question. And it is a really good question. We know that as a result of technology, our communities, and when I say our communities, that's nationally, our major cities, our states, we're much more connected in how we communicate and how we share information. So using the pandemic as an example, we were all struggling to learn, protect ourselves, protect our families, and be responsive to our communities to help protect and service our communities. So that was a really good example of our national relationships that we have with major cities. As we were proffering ideas locally, we were able to reach out to colleagues in other major cities, LA, New York, Philadelphia, Miami, New Jersey, to find out what different steps they were taking, how did it impact their neighborhoods, what lessons could we learn, take that information back and incorporate that into our planning. So it's always extremely helpful to have robust relationships across the country and open lines of communication to be able to share that information. When we think about regionally, Councilor, you've heard me mention this in the past, that when we talk about the way our geographical city and our region is laid out, depending upon where you live in the city, if you're in East Boston, you have a general understanding of how of the impacts in Revere. And it's important that we have conversation with Revere, because if we have to evacuate our residents or we have to rely on mutual aid, there's a strong likelihood that resources could come from those cities. So having a robust conversation, being the major city and being a disciplined leader in the area has enormous impact and extreme value for how we respond as a city. So it's extremely important that we have those relationships. And then lastly, as it relates to professional development, we always want to ensure that we're training our staff so that they have in-service and they have professional skills in the latest, in the most effective strategies with regards to how we respond and how we conduct business. So we always want to make sure that we're not only investing so that we get the greatest service out of our employees, but to also invest in our employees and letting them know that we value them, and we value them from the standpoint of being the most competent and knowledgeable in the space that they work in.
Thank you, Chief. And I also want to say thank you to Lieutenant McCarthy at A1, Maria from the Boston Police, and Detective Gaines. Thank you as well. Detective, I just have one question for you. I represent the downtown area along with Councilor Durkin and Councilor Coletta in and around that area. We have a large immigrant community here in the city, as you know well. What are we doing on human trafficking to ensure that woman, immigrant woman, especially women that may or may not speak English, but how are we protecting them if they are involved in human trafficking as almost as a victim? How are we protecting them to ensure that we're able to get them the services that they need and to get out of that life and into a more stable and productive environment for them?
So pretty much we would deal with them just like we deal with anybody else. We have officers who can speak their languages. If not, we have a language line so we can talk to them directly. We work with a lot of service providers who help with getting them the services that they need. So we would treat them just the same way that we would treat every other person.
And for, I'm thinking of my community. I have a large Asian community, but how are we ensuring that we're also providing services to them that may or may not be here legally, but they're a victim of this human trafficking trade, but we want to make sure that they are respected and they have the services they need, and that this would not impact their immigration status as well. But what are we doing to help these women that might be in that situation? Family Justice Center is certainly one area that could be helpful as well.
Exactly. So when we end up with these type of victims, that's the first thing that we explain to them, that we're not looking at their immigration status. We want to get them to safety first and help them. So that's our first priority. So we assure them that that's not what we're looking at, because we want them to be able to come to us and not be afraid because of their immigration status.
Well, thank you, Detective, and I always knew that, but I'm glad to hear that again, because women involved in this, regardless of their immigration status, should be treated with respect and dignity. So I want to say thank you to your team's Detective for the incredible work you guys do. Difficult work, but we're so fortunate to have men and women on the Boston Police Department that do an excellent job. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, Councilor Santana, thank you for chairing this committee.
Thank you, Councilor. I will now give the floor to Madam President Ruth Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again for hosting your first hearing. I want to thank again the members of administration for attending. I think it was incredibly important, Chief Benford, when you talked about how important it is, especially on the issue of that I know so many of my colleagues care about, the issues of fires and responding to fires, and how residents don't really care who is their city councilor, their state rep, or their member of Congress. They just want their issues solved and resolved. And so the more that we can have that as our focus, how are we solving people's problems, is important. And I know that's what you're laser focused on. So I want to thank you on your work, and I want to thank you on your work when it comes to the migrant crisis and everything that OEM has been doing, really, trailblazing on issues that folks weren't always paying attention to. I want to thank you, Lieutenant, also, and Maria for speaking. I really only have a question for Detective Gaines. As we stated last week, the council passed a resolution against human trafficking, and there's a lot of interest among my colleagues to think about how we as counselors can be more forward-facing on this issue, or it's not an issue that we necessarily confront every day, but it is one that you are confronting. So is there information that you think that we should have as counselors, or things that we don't know about human trafficking, that most people don't know about human trafficking, that you think is important for us to know or elevate or understand, that is maybe misunderstood, or the things that we should keep our eyes open for as city councilors, both on the district level or at large, or any information that you think we should be sharing with the public? I think that would be helpful to share here, and think about when we're thinking about further hearings, when we're thinking about allocation of budget, or when we're just thinking about solving constituent problems. How do we recognize issues that maybe not at the forefront of what we're thinking about every day?
So when it comes to human trafficking, I think a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say a lot of people, I don't know if they realize how big the problem is.
Yeah.
Even before I came into the unit, I didn't realize how big the problem was. But it's a very huge problem where, just a lot of resources. We just need a lot of resources. I mean, because sometimes when we have victims, sometimes they need to have a safe place. They just need therapy, psychological. They just need a lot of resources. And sometimes it's just hard for us to get those resources. So
Thank you.
is our priority.
In terms of housing and housing folks who are often the victims of human trafficking, what does that look like? Like in terms of I know it is resource intensive, but what does that look like from a resource perspective? I know that they could, maybe get priority, but what are some of the resources required and maybe things that we need to focus on better?
So we do have the EVA Center, which is for adults. So when we have victims that need housing, as long as they have it open and we can refer them to the EVA Center. And if they have,
okay.
yes, if they have a placement, we can refer them there.
Okay, has that proven historically to be sufficient, or are there other ways in which we could maybe be creative or be solutions oriented in this area?
It is creative, but sometimes if it's full, then we have to scramble to find other resources for our victims to house them.
Okay, and I'm thinking about like, who ends up being sort of the next go-to if the EVA Center is full? What ends up happening?
We also work with Dr. Judge. She helps us with resources too. So sometimes she'll find a shelter for them if the EVA Center is full.
So one of the things, victims of domestic violence, there's the DV advocates within BPD. There's a victim witness advocates within BPD and the DA's office for those who have been victims of violence. Is there something similar for those who have experienced or who experience human trafficking, and what does that look like?
Yes. So we work closely with the DA's office too, and a victim witness advocate. So whenever we have an assigned case, we always have a victim witness advocate assigned to us, and she helps with those resources also.
Okay. Well, thank you, Detective Gaines. I just want to let you know that you have a council that is very much interested in combating human trafficking and thinking about ways that we can be a partner to this problem. So thank you for being here and for all of your work. I want to thank the administration and everyone for being here and for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. District 1 City Councilor Gabriela Coletta, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you all for your testimony. I didn't mention earlier, but I do support these grants, and I look forward to voting in the affirmative. I would just like to echo the gratitude expressed by my colleagues for everyone's work on human trafficking and everything else. And I will limit my questions to 2 specific questions. And if they require separate conversations, I'll ask in the interest and respect to my colleagues to just please feel free to provide a general response, and then we can maybe touch base separately if deemed necessary by you. But I wanted to focus in on docket 0282, which is the federal emergency grant, and then the docket 0344. Starting with docket 0282, and this will be directed to Chief Shu. I know that this is for building operational capacity and professional development. I just have a clarifying question. You had mentioned 2 areas of interest of mine, which are climate preparedness response and improving the technological infrastructure to best service residents in moments of distress or emergencies. And I have seen that firsthand. Your team is excellent. They're always on the ground at fires. You mentioned the fires in East Boston. And so again, I support this grant, but I was wondering if you can elaborate on this grant and how it would advance those efforts that I mentioned, either climate preparedness response or improving technological infrastructure or general work being done in these spaces in OEM.
Thank you very much, Councilor. I appreciate your question and certainly appreciate your comments on behalf of the staff and the work that they do. It's always appreciated. Two areas that I would point to when we think about climate. I think the climate readiness, the mayor has been very clear in her agenda and preparing us to be ready for the 21st century. So within OEM, we're having open conversations to include multiple departments across the city so that as we think about updating our suite of emergency plans, that they are much more incorporating of the realities of our climate and how it is that we're going to plan and respond. So as we're having conversations with BPDA, with Energy and Environment, it's really about repositioning our department because it really is new space that we're moving into. Unfortunately, as a society, we've been slow to respond, but nonetheless, it is a priority now. So as we think about our staffing, as we think about the new emergency management chief that's going to be coming in, there are very deliberate references and expectations that individuals will have to have a climate lens and be attuned to working with our partners so that we have more robust plans and response protocols around the climate and its implications on how we respond. That's one. Two, on the technology, we have an in-house, GIS staff person that is coming on. And one of the things that we're looking to do is we're looking to work with our city partners, both private and city, to ensure that we're collecting data and we're building out dashboards and models that allow us to incorporate how it is that we respond to the different climate realities in our neighborhoods. We spoke long and hard around really broad-based plans that we have and data sets that we can rely on to help us plan. But some of the things that we fall short on is the individual nuances of neighborhoods and communities. One may or may not be in a flood zone, but we all know of a street or a location in our neighborhood that is prone to receive water that may not be reflected in an appropriate way on maps and so forth. So we're really looking to drill down with our staff coming in the door around building dashboards, working with our city partners on technology and data so that we could build appropriate protocols and responses. And then lastly, certainly not with this grant, but we are procuring additional technology around looking at flooding and some predictive data that could help us in our planning for the future that we hope to procure and bring on board as an additional tool and resource.
Thank you so much, and I'm really excited by that answer. I'm just really interested in this. So as things progress, please update us on this work because it is just so important to the health of the city. And I think I'll switch over to docket 0344. There was mention of Charlestown a lot from Lieutenant McCarthy, which I so appreciate. And my questions are more specific, so you might not have the data, and if it's okay, I would ask to the chair just to follow up to get specifics on this. But and just to clarify, so similar grants in the past, like this one, has been utilized to service Charlestown in particular. I think that's just my clarifying question. If it's been the same grant last year and still going to be used in Charlestown, and if so, in what areas? There was mention of Sullivan Square, but I apologize if I'd missed that earlier.
No, Council, you're correct. So this grant is specifically related for traffic enforcement in Charlestown, in particular the Sullivan Square area, Alfred Street Bridge, Main Street, Rutherford Ave. All that area that we've seen a negative impact traffic-wise, mostly due to the casino. Now we're seeing an uptick, of course, because the underpass is under construction now, which is unrelated to the grant itself, but it's helping us now because we have a 4-month shutdown of that underpass that's going to be continuing this spring through May, which is really seeing a huge impact traffic-wise in that Sullivan Square, by the Schraff Building, Alfred Street coming in from Everett, because the cars are no longer able to go underneath the underpass. But even without the underpass construction, most of it is casino traffic related coming into Charlestown. Like I said, we've just seen a huge increase in constituent complaints due to traffic and speeding, and just the more cars that come through there, the more likelihood there is for accidents and pedestrian safety and bicycle safety. So in terms of exact numbers of accidents, or I did mention the fatal accident we had last year in 2023, right on the Alfred Street Bridge on the Charlestown Everett line. But no specific stats. I could get those for you very quickly. I could talk to our auto investigator and he would have all the moving violations and auto accident investigations that have been done in and around that Sullivan Square, Alfred Street Bridge, coming in from Everett, coming in from the casino.
That would be helpful, and thank you. That does answer my question of Sullivan Square, and you don't cover this 23,000 will not cover North Washington Street Bridge. Is that correct?
No, that's all a separate MOU that we have with the state and the city and JF White for the construction of that bridge. We do have 2 officers there Monday through Friday from starting at 4 p.m. for pedestrian safety. We're seeing actually the good news on that North Wash Bridge is now that the new construction, one side, the outbound side, going towards Charlestown from the north end, that half of the bridge is completed. So we do have 3 straight lanes. So we've seen a decrease in the amount of traffic going over that bridge and the gridlock and the intersection of Keeney Square. But we still do have 2 officers there Monday through Friday to assist with pedestrian safety and to prevent gridlock. And hopefully that project's winding down in the next year or so. And we'll see, a brand new bridge.
Great. And going back to Sullivan Square, I guess I'm wondering how far this 23,000 will go. Like how many days/hours those areas will be covered by how many people, and then also what the specific line item is that this will be allocated and accepted to within BPD's budget would be helpful to know.
Okay. As far as the line item, I would have to look that up. So our hiring it's on a voluntary basis. So we have it out there on the weekends for officers to take on Fridays and Saturdays. And they're different blocks. They're 4 and 8 hour blocks. Basically the overtime is submitted, and when the grant runs out, until when that hits the cap of the money, then it runs out. But I don't think in the past couple of years we've even reached, that amount. I haven't seen, it shut off at all. So, we're in good shape that wise. Maybe Maria could help out in terms of the line item question.
Yeah. So the 23,400 is for the municipal road safety grant, and that's for the mobilizations that take place citywide in motor vehicle, pedestrian, and bike. The other funding, which is from the Mass Gaming Commission, affords A1 a $50,000. So A1 in general gets to utilize that $50,000 to do patrols from 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 4 o'clock in the morning during the high frequency hours where patrons are going to the Encore. So it's 2 different funds, but the Mass Gaming Commission is what is affording Area A a $50,000 line item for overtime.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. So instead of this money coming out of docket 0344, this is actually coming out of docket 0283.
Yes, that's the Mass Gaming Commission grant.
Okay, so out of the $65,000, $51,000 of that is going to this roadway safety program.
Yes, so $50,000 for Area A in overtime to mitigate traffic congestion, accidents, collisions, violations in the area that surrounds the Encore Casino properties. So that's the Mass Gaming Commission grant. And then separately, there's the 23,400, of which a certain amount of that funding allows mobilizations to take place all over the city of Boston. That's not focused on Area A, but mobilizations will take place. Okay.
I do have that. So under the human trafficking unit then, so about only $14,000 of that is going to the human trafficking unit. Is that safe to say?
It's 15,000.
15,000 of that is going to the human trafficking unit. And then the other $50,000 is going to enforcement and overtime. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate everybody answering my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. My colleague from District 3, Counselor John Fitzgerald, you now have the floor.
Thank you again, Chairman. Really appreciate everyone's time here today. I don't have many questions. A lot of them were answered by my colleagues. So thank you to Chief Benford at OEM, obviously, and Deputy Chief Blonaers as well. it speaks to volumes of when a city is prepared for emergency preparations. It speaks to how the city is run and what we are doing in foresight to prepare for those things. And you guys have always set a high bar. And unfortunately, it's been proven over time, right, through some of the things we've had to go through. But our response has always been great. And I know it's a model that others look at. So I appreciate you guys continuing it on. And I look forward to you guys using this grant money to do that. So thank you. Detective Gaines, thank you very much for all your work on human trafficking. I really appreciate it. I know also in District 3, a lot was occurring down in the Mass and Cass area. And I hope that continues to remain a focus, especially when the weather gets warmer and we have to keep our eyes on to make sure that the work that's been done up to date so far continues. So I appreciate that. And I'm very interested in docket number 0344 as it relates to just high visibility enforcement, because aside from basically everywhere I go, I know in my district, and I'm sure my colleagues as well, people talk about the driving, right? And how folks driving is worse, it's faster, that people are driving crazier and taking more chances. And I know I've spoken with Councilor Flynn about this as well, in terms of beefing up a traffic enforcement department within the police, because it's also an additional revenue stream that I think we may need in the future. But we should certainly set some limits. So I wonder that 23,000, and I'm sorry if these were confused before. I want to make sure I have this right. The 23,000, it's a small dollar amount in the grand scheme of things. What does that look like under the funding high visibility enforcement? Because I want to know what $23,000 gets us and how we can get more of that for folks to beef up this enforcement. So if anyone could speak to that, please and thank you.
So with the high visibility enforcement, that's the Mass Gaming Commission money that goes to Area A. And so they physically put patrols in key locations where collisions have based on our database and our data analysis, have taken place. And Lieutenant McCarthy could speak to that much better than I can. But the money that goes towards the mobilizations isn't high visibility patrols. So the mobilization money is joint operations in areas to target specific types of things like seatbelt violations or drunk driving. Whereas the Area A money is really the high visibility patrols types of overtime funding. And I'm going to hand that over to Lieutenant McCarthy.
Sure. Yes. Thanks, Maria. So, I mean, just for a point of reference on sort of traffic patrols, Boston police wise and in history. So, when I first came on the job 26 years ago, our manpower was much higher, and every station in the city had a dedicated officer for traffic enforcement, usually on all three shifts, even the overnight shift some stations had. And some stations even had two officers. So that officer would come to roll call at 7:30 a.m. or 4 p.m. and their whole entire shift would be dedicated to basically high visibility traffic patrols in a certain area that was usually constituent generated. So if there was a certain part of the city, if area B2, for example, was experiencing, constituent complaints about speeding on a certain section of Blue Hill Ave, that officer, after roll call at 4 p.m., he would go to that specific location on Blue Hill Ave, and that would be his entire tour, would be to do traffic enforcement at that intersection or at that area of Blue Hill Ave, and get out his LiDAR and do speeding enforcement there to reduce the problem in that community. Unfortunately, with our manpower now, we don't have that luxury. We can't take an officer now off the street from taking radio calls and say, you're just going to do traffic enforcement at this location. So that's why this grant is so key, because it provides money in the budget on an overtime basis for us to hire an officer specifically for that area. For us, of course, it's 815 in Charlestown, the Rutherford Ave, Sullivan Square, Alfred Street Bridge area, casino-related traffic. That's why the Gaming Commission's involved. So we can take that officer and have him up there at that high-visibility location to issue traffic citations, whether it's speeding, whether it's a red light or a stop sign by the Traft building or anything in that area where we've received so many complaints that are generated from the Charlestown community over the last several years when the casino's been in existence. So That's kind of where we're at with it. It would be great if we had the manpower on regular time to just take one or two of our officers every shift and say, this is where you're going to do traffic patrol. You're going to be there for your 8-hour shift, issuing, traffic citations or moving violations for these things that, like I said, are constituent generated, but we don't have that luxury anymore. So that's why the grant funds those officers on an overtime basis during those key times, Friday and Saturday nights, when we've seen an increase in traffic flow from Everett and coming from Boston into Charlestown with all the vehicles.
No, I appreciate it. I get so, and thank you. And I know manpower has been an issue, right? And that's why when people always say, why is the traffic going nuts? I tell them, well, look, there's not enough police out there they've got to take care of the other things over priority. And the traffic enforcement kind of falls lower on the list. And therefore you've got people knowing that they can run red lights and drive distracted, et cetera. I guess my question is, out of that small dollar amount of the 23, what is that like? Does that get you a week of overtime for this high visibility enforcement? Is that a day of what does that actually get you? Because I'm trying to just quantify over time what it would need to beef this up.
So the 23,400 is for the mobilizations.
Yeah.
So out of the 23,400, about 18,720 is in overtime. And then the remaining 4,680 is to buy those speed guns. So that's a different grant. But that doesn't, but the 50,000 is what you'll be able to utilize in a 12-month period to do those mobilizations in Area A around the Encore casinos. Yeah. So it's two separate types of activities, not that the mobilizations aren't visibility, but the mobilizations are targeting very specific behaviors. And there's several of them that take place over the year. Each one of them a different behavior. Whereas with the Area A money, which is 50,000, that money is really just for Area A to utilize to mitigate traffic safety and traffic collisions and violations right around the Encore properties.
Yeah. Over the course of a year, that's the hope is that
yes.
For a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we don't spend it down within the year, we can always have the opportunity to reach out to the funder and ask them for a no-cost extension on the deadline for the grant.
Understood. Thank you very much for my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor for District 4, Brian Morrell, you now have the floor for questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the administration for their presentation and all the information that was provided here today. A lot of my colleagues have asked my question. Traffic enforcement is something that I'm hearing constantly from our constituents. I remember growing up around Blue Hill Ave, that traffic enforcement officer that would just circle the block over and over again. And that's something that, constituents still call for to this day. I guess the one question I do have that wasn't asked is, and this is for Detective Gaines, can you speak to any specific initiatives or programs that your department does to raise awareness about human trafficking and engage with any, communities that we've seen being targeted over time?
One which we just did the other day, we've been going out to a lot of the hotels to show their employees what to look out for. That's one of them. We would like to get into the schools to let the young ones know what to look out for. So we're working on different ways to get out and let the community know about human trafficking and what signs to look out for.
Thank you for that. Yep, go ahead.
Director Shevers, I think.
I'd also like to add, over the past 10 years, the Boston Police Department has done a lot of learning and education around buyer demand and how buyers themselves are driving the sex trade in Boston. And so we've done a lot of work towards deterring buyers, educating communities around the harms of buying and targeting buyers for deterrence campaigns, in the hopes that the buying itself will go down in Boston and reduce the harm that's caused by buyers. So if you're interested in learning more about that work, please let me know. I can send you a bunch of written documents that we've created over time and over the past 10 years that allow us to sort of think differently about this and go after the buyer as the driver of the harm that's caused by this trade.
Thank you for that.
We
Yeah,
do
and
a
I'll
lot of-
definitely, yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Detective Gaines. Yeah.
Do a lot of like we do a lot of undercover where we will set up ads acting as like the person, and then we'll have the buyers come to us, and we summons them, arrest them. So we do that a whole lot. We just did that a week and a half ago, and we had 15. We had 15 of them on that particular day, but we do that constantly.
Thank you for that work. Very important work, and you know, we live in Boston, and sometimes we don't understand or realize what's going on around us. So I thank you for doing the work that you guys do. And Chief Benford, just want to say thank you for your work. Erie Ellington fire. Unfortunately, we were able to see the resources and the services that your department does out there. So I just want to say thank you for your work, and looking forward to making sure that your office has what it needs in order to meet those unfortunate situations. So thank you to the administration again. Ms. Chevers, I'd love to get that information, and thank you, Chair. No further questions.
Thank you, Councilor. Before we just move on to public testimony, we do have one member patiently waiting to give a public testimony, but wanted to give an opportunity for any questions from my colleagues. And kind of just raise your hand. I mean, I know if you want, I see District 1 City Councilor Gabriela Coletta, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just would like to follow up on docket 0283 and just describe how this grant in particular was outlined. So it says that it's $65,000 in the form of a grant awarded by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, administered by the police department. The grant would fund investigations that are coordinated between the BPD Human Trafficking Unit and other law enforcement entities. And so it sounds like 50,000 of that is going to enforcement. And I have heard from folks that Sullivan Square is well enforced, and it's very good over there. I guess, what is the other $15,000 being used for in terms of human trafficking, and how is it, I guess, being utilized within the unit?
I can answer that. And Detective Gaines can as well. Basically, there's a couple of different types of activities that enforcement requires. And so oftentimes the HTU will work with the NCOR Public Safety Police, Mass State Police, Everett Police, and other agencies that support the work around NCOR. And they will do surveillance in terms of activities that are taking place on the floor at some of these casinos and restaurants and bars and clubs. And in that surveillance, oftentimes you'll see it yourself. Certain young women that are being watched by somebody to approach customers. And that types of activities requires a lot of surveillance. Beyond the surveillance, there are other joint operations that take place, such as what Detective Gaines noted, around going after buyers and targeting buyers and deterring buyers from thinking that's an okay thing to do in the casino properties. A third thing is they spend a lot of time gathering intelligence and doing investigative work when they feel that there's a larger sex trafficking network in play in back of what they're physically seeing on the floor. So there's multiple activities that go into the type of work that the Human Trafficking Unit partakes in partnership with other law enforcement agencies that serve the Encore communities and the city of Boston. And so that, Detective Gaines, I'll hand it over to you.
That we do is what we call reverse stings. So we'll respond to ads that the victims put up. And we'll respond to those ads. And once we go to the hotel rooms where they're located, we don't look to arrest, we provide service. They're victims, so we wanted to provide any services that they need, and to see if, they're being exploited by someone, and to get that information. But we do a lot of those reverse stings also, and in addition to the John stings. And we do a lot of investigative with the state police and the FBI and other towns and cities that are dealing with this too. So a lot of times we work together in these investigations.
Okay, I'm sorry, just one follow-up question, if that's okay, Chair. Thank you. This is helpful. I mean, you can see the confusion where one is talking about enforcement on the streets, and then this one is specifically talking about human trafficking and to fund investigations. And so that's where my confusion came. And once there was clarity, I totally understood. Is the Massachusetts Gaming Commission setting the parameters of how we? Okay.
Yes. So oftentimes they give us like a threshold amount. For example, they'll say this year, X number of dollars is available. What they require is that what we apply for the money for can be directly traced back to casino operations. So we could apply for funding because we know that there's sex trafficking taking place on casino properties. Obviously, through the data, there's a lot of traffic, collisions and violations. We could easily tie that back to to the activity at the casino facility. So as long as we tie into what is taking as a mitigating factor that arises from casino operations, they will approve of the funding. That's not to say that every dime that we apply for everything we believe is an issue, they fund. So if we go to them with a $200,000 application that includes multiple units in the Boston Police Department, they get to pick and choose how much they give us of that application and what they feel is most relevant. So for this particular grant, they understand the relevance of the traffic safety piece of it, and they understand the relevance and the connection to the sex trafficking piece of it. There are other things going on that take place in terms of criminal activity that we applied for this year, which isn't this grant we talk about today, but an application that recently just went in. And so we're understanding now the impact of casino activities on criminal activities that take place in Boston. As long as we can make that link, like there's money laundering taking place, there's a lot of different activities that are taking place, but we have to prove the connection came from activities at the casino. And that's where we need data and research and anecdotal information to prove to them, like, no, actually this is happening, and it might not come out in an incident report or crime or traditional crime data, but there are other sources that tell us that there's drug trafficking along with sex trafficking. There's money laundering activities and all these other types of activities that relate to casino activities. And so that's the nature of the way that particular RFP comes out every year. It's saying we will give you money, but you have to prove the link between casino activities and this criminal dynamic that you're explaining to us in this grant application.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Chair. I want to be respectful for my colleagues. I know there's others that have questions, but would love a further conversation on this if possible. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilor. Councilor from District 6, Ben Weber, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you, Chair, and I apologize. I had to hop off for a quick call, so I hope I just had a couple quick questions, and I apologize if they're duplicative of things that have already been addressed. But just to hop on that last point, Ms. Cheever, so there's no data right now about whether there's been increased human trafficking or related types of criminal activity since the casino has been operational?
Yes, and it comes in very specific categories. So every time you get a call for service, there's call for service data. And then separately, if you get to the call for service and there's an incident, a police officer will fill out an incident report. So we get data drawn down from that. Afterwards, you find out new information. You may have a supplemental report that's connected to the original incident. That's other data. And then there's arrest data. So we have a certain specific categories of data, but that data doesn't aptly reflect the broader issues that come out of casino activities. For example, let me just say this. Say a man went to the casino and he lost $30,000, and he comes home and he's drunk driving, and he gets caught drunk driving. And so we have an incident in Hyde Park, but there's nothing in that report said that he got drunk at the casino. So you've got that's lost data. Guy comes home and beats up his wife, domestic violence. Again, nothing in that report says he was at the casino. And so things that originated maybe at that casino, stress caused by losing money, too much alcohol consumption, doesn't directly connect to multiple crimes that may be happening in different neighborhoods in Boston, because there isn't a data set that directly links that says this is how it began. And so the Mass Gaming Commission has been setting aside some funding to start looking at better ways to collect data and information about the impacts of casino activity on crime, but also on other things, addiction, losing someone's home, all those negative impacts that originate out of gambling addiction impact the city of Boston. But they impact it not only in public safety ways, they impact it in public health ways. But in order to understand that, we need more data and we need more research so that we can make the connections between casino activities, addiction, and the negative impacts on our neighborhoods in the city of Boston.
Yeah, thank you. Will that include crime in that sort of this effort would include crime related to online gambling?
I could get back to you and ask. The Mass Gaming Commission itself just put out an RFP on the impact of sex trafficking related to casino activity. In general, I have not heard anything in any of the research meetings about online gambling activity, but I will get back to you if I find that. Some of the money that they put out with the block grant this past year, which is the grant we just submitted, so it's not before you yet, is allowing us, or we applied for, the Public Health Commission, some in-school education funding so that we could get kids at an early age to in the community to understand the harm of gambling and the truth of gambling. And so hopefully they will fund that grant and they will allow the city to do some proactive, preemptive, preventative work in our communities around gambling. But I haven't heard anything about the online stuff.
Okay, yeah, I feel like I'm seeing, like, they used to have predatory lending or credit card practices where they offer these crazy introductory rates. You see the same thing with, I think, some of these online gambling outfits, sports gambling especially, where they offer you $200 whatever just to even start because they know they're going to make the money later. Anyway, I'll leave that. My last question on docket 0344 is just, and this may have already been asked, the speed measuring devices. I don't know what exactly that is, and is there any plan to put in, cameras at intersections?
So the City of Boston Department of Transportation and the Boston Police Department work very well together
So I think you're freezing.
The data. And when we look at the data, in this particular grant, we're buying 2 LiDAR devices. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, so for this particular pocket of money, we're allowed to buy the 2 LiDAR devices to put into districts that don't have them. However, the city in a broader, more general level plans effectively. Out of the Department of Transportation, in partnership with the Boston Police, we're able to determine where the high frequency collisions take place. And with that data, we're in violations. And with those 2 pieces of data, we work with the Department of Transportation, and they decide on a broader level where certain cameras should go based on that data.
Okay. And when do you would anticipate the knowing which intersections to put the cameras in?
So I could get back to you on that, but I can tell you, and I can send you the top 10 collision locations in Boston, because every year the Bureau of Field Services does an analysis and prints out those top locations. And typically they're the same locations year after year. They don't change often. But in those locations, we put more patrols, we put cameras, and we try to mitigate the danger of traffic, of motor vehicle, ped, and bike collision. So I can get you that sort of 10, that list of the 10 most hotspot areas for collisions, if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be great. And sorry, thank you very much for your testimony, and I appreciate you showing up. And back to you, Chair Santana.
Thank you, Councilor. Seeing that there are 0 other hands for questions. Oh, Councilor Flynn from District 2.
Thank you, Councilor Santana. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this hearing was critical. It was important in learning from these dedicated and professional city employees. Provided a lot of great information, and just want to compliment you, Mr. Chair, on this hearing. And it's at these hearings that we really learn about what's happening in city departments, learning the nuts and bolts and follow-up questions. It was excellent back and forth from my colleagues and city officials. So just want to say thank you to the chair for conducting this hearing. And it's how we learn about city government, how we learn about what's happening in city departments is through these hearings. So just want to compliment the chair for doing an outstanding job. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors, for those kind words. And I actually want to thank all my council colleagues for your thoughtful questions. And we will actually now move forward now with public testimony. When your name is called, please accept the Zoom request to be promoted to panelists and unmute yourself and state your name, neighborhood, organization affiliation. Please speak into your microphone and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. I believe now we have Robert Jenkins here with us. Robert, you now have the floor. Mr. Jenkins, you can unmute yourself. Yep.
Good morning, Council Chair on Public Safety. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be on your first hearing today. Congratulations again and all the city councilors. I have a captive audience right now. I have all you all together. My name is Robert Jenkins. I'm Mattapan resident for over 58 years. I used to work under Mayor Ray Flynn, so I know how city government operates. I'll be very brief. I'm also one of the 15 impacted group advisors for the White Stadium project, and we've had a number of meetings. There's been a lot of concern around transportation, and they're going to be starting construction soon. And I'm going to definitely be chairing to have city agencies. This is a beautiful meeting. Me as a constituent, I love this. We have to plan a meeting in the community. I would say maybe hit a number of neighborhoods because this information is very important. Just to see how city government works. But for those that don't know how city government works, it's a way to for the city to show transparency on working with our city agencies. I work very closely with Area B3 as a number of community-based organizations. So that's something that we need to look about to get this word out to everyone. All the committees are very important, but getting them all out here and getting out this pertinent information will just enhance and get more funding for what is out there. I've heard what everybody has to say, so I don't really have to have any questions. I just want to be really brief on human trafficking. I've been working with in the human services field, especially around young students and youth. And when I worked at the Jermaine Lawrence program, which is now shut down, but a lot of that program had a lot of our young girls, a lot of our young females were involved in human trafficking. That's something that we have to do some awareness. I heard the young lady, I didn't get her name, from the police department, said that they're doing programs around youth and gambling. They should do the same thing. Think about working with our community-based organizations, Boston Public Schools, Centers for Youth and Families, as well as the Boston Public Health Commission, to get this word out on the dangerousness of human trafficking. And again, bringing it to the community, it's in and around our neighborhoods. Another point of matter I would like to make, when the warm weather gets up, and I know the police definitely know what's gonna happen, you get all these young guys out there on mini bikes, motorcycles, mopeds, going up and down the street, causing havoc, and especially Blue Hill Ave, where it is everywhere in the city is, it's crazy with traffic. I mean, when it seems like you have traffic snarls and traffic jams starting at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's not even the high point. But again, when we have a lot of construction jobs going on and White Stadium's getting ready to go online, as well as all these other projects, Blue Hill Ave, the renovation of Blue Hill Ave is going to go online soon. It's going to be very imperative that we all work together to make sure that we, keep everybody safe as possible. I know the high times during the weekends because people are out and about. But again, I like this meeting, but I would just only want to recommend another thing is that all city agencies, whenever there's projects, do more of a collaboration. And that's all I have to say right now. But again, I'd like to thank all you all, and definitely know all your office numbers. And again, Council Chair Santana, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Appreciate you being here and your presence. I would now like to thank the members of the Office of Emergency Management and Boston Police Department for all your service to our city and taking the time to participate and inform me and my colleagues on how these grants will be used. Thank you for your service and keeping Boston safe. Thank you also to our Council Central staff for facilitating this hearing. Thank you to my council colleagues for joining us today. And most importantly, thank you to the members of the public who attended today's hearing or watched at home. As chair of the Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice, you have me and my committee's gratitude for your attentiveness to our city's public safety services. With that, this hearing on docket number 0282, 0283, and 0344 is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr.
Good
Chair.
job.
Great job.